Welcome to another video, my precious viewers and subscribers. How you are doing? I hope everything is fine and well with all of my precious viewers and my precious subscribers. So, as promised, I did say to you that I'm going to do another example to demonstrate to you how to calculate the critical path as well as the duration for your construction project. So I'm going to use this video to do this example. I think this example is a much more simpler one than the previous example. So just bear with me as I go through this simple example with you to calculate the critical path as well as the duration for your construction project. So without further ado, let's get right to this video. So in this example, we have here activity A through to F. So we have activity A, B, C, D, E, F. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6 activities. And the duration for the activity is as follows. So for activity A has a duration of 2 days. Activity B has a duration of 8 days. Activity C has a duration of 6 days. Activity D has a duration of 3 days. Activity E has a duration of 4 days. And activity F has a duration of only 1 day. So if you should look at this example more keenly, if you should look at this table here, so as I've mentioned to you before in my previous example, I'm going to show you now how you can derive the plotting of the diagram based on the activity that precedes the activity that comes before that activity. So we have here the predecessor of A is nothing. Nothing comes out of A, right? B comes out of A and A precedes A. C comes out of A and A precedes A. And D comes out of A and A precedes D. And E comes out of B, C, D, activity B, C, D. And activity B, C, D precedes activity E. And activity F comes out of activity E. So while I was learning this how to do this, the calculation of these, I just simply tell myself what activity is coming out of what activity. So as to just make the process a little bit simpler, because not everyone knows how to explain these things in a way that most people can follow. So how I do it, I just say activity A comes out of nothing. Activity B comes out of activity A. Activity C comes out of activity A also. Activity D comes out of activity A also. And activity E comes out of activity B, C, and D. And activity F comes out of activity E. That is a more simpler way to interpret this information, this table, in my opinion. So I'm going to plot the diagram, so just pay attention now. So if you should look, activity A comes out of nothing, right? Activity B comes from out of activity A. So we're going to merge activity A to B like this, and note the arrow. This arrow indicates that activity B comes from out of activity A. So we deal with activity A, we have dealt with activity B. So activity C comes from out of activity A also. So we have activity C here. So we merge activity C there. Activity C comes from out of activity A also. So activity D comes from out of activity A. So activity D comes from out of activity D. Activity D comes from out of activity A. So we merge activity A to activity D. Follow? So we have dealt with this one. We have now activity E comes from out of activity B, C, D. So we have activity E here, and we have B, C, D. So we're going to merge B, C, D to activity E. So we have it like this, like that, and like this. So we have activity E comes from out of activity B, C, and D. So we have dealt with this one. So we have now activity F, which comes out of activity E. So we merge activity E to activity F like that. So this is the diagram here, the full plotted diagram in terms of which activity comes from out of which activity, and which activity depends on which activity to finish before the other activity can start. So let's do the calculation real quickly. So we have here activity A, which has a duration of 2 days. So since we are starting with activity A, the early start for activity A is going to be 0. So we have, for the early finish, we're going to have 0 plus 2, which is 2. Right? So we have the early finish of activity A is going to be the early start for activity B, the early start for activity C, and the early start for activity D. So we're going to have these two here. This early finish for activity A is going to be the early start for activity B, the early start for activity C, and the early start for activity D. So here we have it. Early start equal 2 for activity B, early start equal 2 for activity C, and early start equal 2 for activity D, because we have the early finish of activity A, which is 2. So let's check the duration now. So we have B, which has a duration of 8 days. So we're going to have 8 plus 2, which is 10. Right? We have C, which has a duration of 6 days. So we're going to have 2 plus 6, which is 8. We have D, which has a duration of 3 days. So we're going to have 3 plus 2, which is 5. Right? So now we have activity E, which depends on activity B, C, and D. So we're going to go with the higher of these 3 activities. So we have activity B with an early finish of 10 days, activity C, which has an early finish of 8 days, and activity D, which has an early finish of 5 days. So we're going to go with 10, because of these three activities, 10 is the highest days. So the early finish, the early start for activity E is going to be 10. Activity E now has a duration of 4 days, so it's going to be 10 plus 4, which is 14. Right? And activity F, which comes out of activity E, so the early finish for activity E is going to be the early start for activity F. So we bring our 14 right here. So we have F, which has a duration of 1 day. So we're going to have 14 plus 1, which is 15 for the early finish for activity F. So right there we have just calculated the duration of this project. So this project has a duration of 15 days. So that is the forward pass. So let us do the backward pass now to calculate the critical part. So the early finish of activity F is going to be the late finish for activity F. So this 15 is going to come right here, 15. And remember, as I've indicated to you in my previous video, that when you're doing the backward pass, you subtract, and when you're doing the forward pass, we add. As in the case here, you see when I was doing the forward pass going that direction, I add each duration. But the backward pass, I'm going to subtract each duration, right? So we have activity F, which has a duration of 1 day, so we're going to have 1 from 15, which is 14. Right? Now, the late start for activity F is going to be the late finish for activity E. So this 14 is going to come right here for the late finish for activity E. Right? Activity E now has a duration of 4 days. So we're going to subtract 4 from 14, which is 10. Right? So we know that the late start for activity E is going to be the late finish for activity B, C, and D, because activity E comes from out of activity B, C, and D. So this late start here is going to be the late finish for activity B. So we're going to carry our 10 right here. It's going to be the late start for activity C. So we're going to carry our 10 right here. Right? And it's going to be the late finish for activity D. So we're going to carry our 10 right here. Right? So we're going to find out the late start now. So we're going to subtract 8 from 10, which is 2. So activity B will have a late start of 2. So we move to activity C now. Activity C, we're going to subtract 6 from 10, which is 4. So late start for activity C is going to be 4. Right? And we have activity D, which has a duration of 3. So we're going to subtract 3 from 10, which is 7. So the late start for activity D is 7. So we reach activity A now. So let me say something to you that when we are doing the forward pass, we choose the highest duration. And when we are doing the backward pass, we choose the lowest duration. So if you notice that activity B, C, and D comes from out of activity A. So we're going to choose the lowest of activity B, C, and D. So activity B has a late start of 2. Activity C has a late start of 4. And activity D has a late start of 7. So we're going to choose the lowest, which is 2, out of these 3 activities. So the late start here is going to be the late finish of 2. And then 2 from 2 is 0. Right? So right there we have calculated both the forward pass and the backward pass, and we have calculated the duration of the project, which is 15 days. So let us do the calculation of the float now to calculate the critical part, or to see which part in this diagram is on the critical part. So as I've mentioned to you in my last example, that in order to calculate the float, it is the late start minus the early start, or your late finish minus your early finish. So as you can see, this is your late start, which is 0. 0 from 0 is 0. And 2 from 2 is 0. So this activity A here has a float of 0 days. 0 days. Right? We come to activity B now. We have 2 from 2 is 0. And we have 10 from 10 is 0. So the float here on activity B is 0 days. We come to activity E, and we subtract our late start of 10 days from our early start of 10 days, which is 0. So 10 from 10 is 0. 14 from 14 is 0. So we have 0 days float on activity E. Activity F, we have 14 from 14, which is 0. 15 from 15, which is also 0. So we can then deduce that the part A B, E, and F are all on the critical path. So activity A, B, E, F is our critical path. And remember what I've said about the critical path, that the activities that are on the critical path must be completed in the duration or the allotted time in order for you to finish your project on schedule or on time. So activity A, B, E, and F has 0-day float. So it has to finish with the activity A has to finish within 2 days. Activity B has to finish within 8 days. Activity E has to finish within 4 days. And activity F has to finish in 1 day for your project to finish on schedule or on time. Let us check out the flow for activity C and activity D, because these two activities are not on the critical path because they have floating days. Activities which has floating days cannot be on the critical path, and that is a point to note, right? So we have here 4 minus 2 is 2, 10 minus 8, 10 minus 8 is 2, right? So 2 from 4 is 2, and 8 from 10 is 2. So activity C has a float of 2 days, right? We come to activity D. Activity D, so we have 7 minus 2 is 5, and 10 minus 5, which is 5. So activity D has a float of 5 days. So we have activity C and activity D. Activity C has 2 floating days, and activity D has 5 floating days. That means activity C and D, you can allow those 2 activities to lag behind for 2 days and 5 days respectively before you can proceed to activity E. So there's also another way how you can calculate the critical path. The critical path is usually the longest path. So if we should note the path, we have path A, B, E, and F. We have path A, B, E, F, and we know that 2 plus 8 is 10, 10 plus 4 is 14, plus 1 is 15. So part A, B, E, F have 15 days, and if you notice, it has come back to the 15 days duration for the project. Now we have another part. We have part A, C, E, and F. We have part A, C, E, F. So let's just check that duration. So we have 2 plus 6 is 8, plus 8 plus 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13. So we have 13 days here. Right? We also have part A, D, E, and F. We have part A, D, E, F. So let's just check that out now. So we have 2 plus 3 is 5, plus 4 is 9, plus 1 is 10. Right? So we can see that we were correct. Our critical path is indeed part A, B, E, F, which is 15 days. So on both occasions, we calculate the float, which gives us 0 float on part A, B, E, F, and we calculate the longest duration, which gives us part A, E, and F with 15 days, because 15 days is higher than 13 and 10. So part A, B, E, F is on the critical part. So I have come to the end of this video. I hope by doing this example brings more clarity for those of you who have not catch it on the previous videos. I hope you can use this video to go over and understand it in a fulsome way. So for my regular viewers and subscribers, you know how to govern your things already. If you're new to this channel, remember to hit the like button, leave a comment, and remember to subscribe. Take care of yourself and enough respect.